When you hear climate change, what's the first image that pops in your mind? I imagine for many of you, images like the effects on our rainforests, our oceans, or even our cute polar bears come to mind. However, why don't images like these here represent the majority's perception of climate change? Frontline communities, who are defined as lower income, communities of color, and those with fewer financial resources, are facing the most intense impacts of climate change. And yet, existing climate adaptation policies deny resources through participation barriers, focus on short-term impacts, not long-term impacts, like climate change, and differ from community members' visions. This disconnect relates to the traditional learning model taught in our universities today, where faculty and student knowledge are separated from community knowledge as seen here. And yet, communities play an integral part of bridging this gap. Therefore, to solve socio-ecological problems, we need more community-engaged models, where communities, faculty, and students work together to develop solutions to climate change. This led me to my question: what are the benefits and challenges of community-engaged learning in universities, and how can community-engaged learning enhance climate resilience in frontline communities? To address this question, I worked with UW's Climate Impacts Group, who hosts the Northwest Climate Resilience Collaborative, a NOAA-funded organization working towards assisting tribes and frontline communities in their resilience to climate change. I worked with their scaling portfolio team to create a summer program that works on building the capacity of community-based organizations, building the capacity of youth activists, enhancing community-engaged work in climate change, and supporting justice-centered collaborations. To address how community-engaged learning could build the capacity of community-based organizations, I created an online survey for community-based organizations based in Idaho, Oregon, and Washington from the NCRC's Community Grants Program. Furthermore, I also administered informal interviews at UW to discover the gaps in existing environmental justice curriculum and the needs for community-engaged programming here at UW. Finally, I conducted a literature review that focused on co-production through a climate and education lens, existing community-engaged learning programs, and how community-engaged learning programs could build climate resilience. After completing my research and internship, I concluded 3 key benefits and challenges to community-engaged learning. The first key benefit I revealed is community-engaged learning can increase the diversity of perspectives available to students. The second key benefit I concluded is community-engaged learning can enhance science communication. As my literature revealed, scientists can become more socially engaged. And the third key benefit is that community-engaged learning can create publicly accountable and scientifically legitimate decisions around climate change, as both perspectives can be influenced by the other. On the other hand, I also determined 3 key challenges to community-engaged learning. The first being, current university structures are not conducive to community-engaged learning, as seen in my interviews, as many students lacked the foundational environmental justice topics. The second key benefit I determined is community-based organizations often lack the time and resources to participate in these models, as in my surveys, the majority could only commit 1 day a week. And the last key challenge I determined is that community-engaged learning requires creative and expensive solutions, as seen in my internship and literature, as it's hard to quantify community engagement. If we are to solve socio-ecological problems, more community-engaged models are essential to preparing future policymakers and researchers to engage more holistically with communities. Now, I'm going to ask you all again. When you hear climate change, what's the first image that pops in your mind? These models can change what and who is thought of when thinking about climate change, so all communities can be a part of the conversation. I'd like to thank Climate Impacts Group and the scaling team, Earth Labs team, my supervisor, Zach Thill, my faculty advisor, Megan Ibata, Tyler, and my friends, families, and my roomies that are all here tonight. Thank you. Okay, any questions? Okay, back there. Yeah. Yeah, totally. That's a really good question. So to repeat the question, it was, did I identify any challenges for universities to participate in these models? Is that right? Yes. So that was a really big challenge. And so kind of going off of how they're not conducive, really big problem is that this isn't university's main goal right now. And so that was one challenge, is that one of their main goals right now, if you have a lot of researchers, postdocs, grad students, is that they're trying to publish papers and get research out, which is on a strict timeline, which doesn't fit community engagement, where you really have to take the time to talk to communities, talk to policymakers, and really take time to try and create something together. So that is a really big challenge, but I think in the future, if universities can change how they allocate funding, going with how they change their goals, so maybe focusing on including community engagement, then that's somewhere where maybe we could see a change.
Question?
Yes.
In your research or your interviews, did you come across any groups that were doing like a good example of effective community engaged learning, like universities or otherwise?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So the question for anyone who didn't hear is, did I come across any current examples of community engaged learning? And I did in my literature a lot. I think it was Arizona State University, their sustainability sciences is trying to do a community engaged program. And I found that sustainability sciences is right now really leading community engagement. So go environmental studies. But also there are a lot of ones international too, like Barcelona is a really big place right now. And there's actually one in Kenya that's open international to anyone who can apply.
Thank you so much.